My most favorite lines when it comes down to the English symmetrical is the Marozzi bind. Marozzi bind is a particular line in which basically white gets to bind down black and limit him in different ways. It is really good if it comes out right. So this is a game that was played between Lazaro Brugzone and someone that was named Mitton. The game was played in this Skattersborg 2005, and it was a great example because first of all, white got the possibility to strengthen his center, and then after a3, basically prevent black from reaching out to attack on the b4, and thereby open up the resource for e4. And truth be told, this is a great idea. Not just because of these couple pawns and the two knights that are around and supporting, but everything else with it. There is the chance to stop or kind of hold, keep on hold black's active ways to play moves like d5 or even b5, which is really important. And so given the limitations that black has over these squares, the fact that he can't really move in there or deliver any sort of like setup, that just gives white such a brilliant sequence, such a great way to play it. Now, for example, castling short, white could have had different moves, but then black is intending to play d5. If black is really given that opportunity to play a move like d5, he would open up, and his pieces will likely just come out straight and open. This is why white picked up to do the move of knight at f3. Knight f3 takes away black's idea of playing a move of pawn into the d5, and then ultimately after the move like this, we could get ready for bishop to the e2, we could short castle, and we can do many different moves that are really going to hold back black and his development. So this is what really makes a strong sense in this position. So essentially, black plays b6. He doesn't have that opportunity to play d5 or anything like this, but it's working great for white. He can do bishop e2. He's ready to go ahead with his short castles, possibly bishop f4. I mean, the development really seems to work out well for white. And that's what keeps this position so much better for white. Bishop b7, castles. Rook c8, bishop f4. Just the idea itself that every single piece of white can now really turn out, to be a very useful one. Can keep black down. Maybe we can think of a move like bishop to the d6 and others. It's just terrific, and black's just constantly behind. Like, the c4 and e4, in my opinion, is the best turnaround for white. It is the best set of pieces and pawns that can guarantee us a long-term advantage and on every step. And so it's quite great this way, really, if you think about that. Most of black's own pieces don't have that much of a shot, really, to make anything. So white can do great. Now, what else is there? I mean, is there more? It's probably there is, but it's just very hard, very difficult. For instance, let's see. This one, maybe one of the ideas could be to play knight a5. So how does white respond against a move like knight a5 with a threat? Now, remember, it's great to have those pawns, but you must give everything in order to limit, or prevent him from breaking through. Thereby, a little move like knight of the d2 just really seems to fit. We have a defense on both the e4 and c4. We have the majority of black's pieces down on the back side, like the queen on the d8 and the rook on f8 and a couple others. And so while white keeps improving, the moment when black played with the move of d5 was the time where white actually picks up to play c takes d, and then pawn to the e5. And it is truly great. At least to me, it looks like an excellent position. Essentially, black has a big problem. He is going to get attacked right now. He's going to lose space. One of his best defenders is going to be missing once we play it with e5. So this is good. Knight e4, knight takes to e4, pawn takes to the e4, and b4 to force him to force him down. So it's just it's a really interesting idea. After b4, then there's bishop to the g5, bishop takes the g, queen takes the g, and h4. It's now we're catching black under fire because of the hanging knight, the queen, and the fact that rook d8 does no longer work. So that certainly brings white a huge advantage. Queen takes h, taking. And I mean, there are other ideas that came out. We don't want to see necessarily all the middle game complications, but I love the idea of the Maroczy bind. It could be played in many different ways, and it provides a huge amount of space and possibilities. If you get it there, you could be very successful with any sort of sequence that you follow. That's why e4, c4, and the Maroczy could be awesome. It could be one of the most brilliant versions of how you can take a good advantage, could take a good control of this position. Now we can take a look. Let's take a look at a couple others, so we could see how does how does that develop. What other ways exist? Let's say to build a proper formation, a good structure. This is a game that was played between Valehel Pons and Karyakin, in which basically we're going to see the approach by white played a little differently. I mean, so queen takes to the d4, queen f4. A very smart idea. Whenever black's intending to chase the queen, instead of going back with it and setting it on a much worse position, we're able to put it on the f4, which makes it quite good. So we have that opportunity to think about a candidate like knight b5. We could think of a move like e4. We could think about, like all sorts of different ideas. And I have to admit that it does look quite great. Queen f4. Possibly black will just do what? Okay, so let's say bishop to the b7. e4 sets us up. It's e5, which comes as a great idea. It's bishop to the d3 that we can deliver, and it is the whole attack on the king's side that is actually terrific for white to build on. d6, bishop to the d3. Pawns are great. Queen is good. The limitations have actually struck, black in their own way, and white is ready. He's got all of these good moves that he needs to make in order to really evaluate it correctly. Castles, bishop e3, rook to the d1, pressure versus the d6, everything. Just do it right and do it strongly. This is good now. With black playing a6 on his own, that was his actual move. White simply picks up to make the move of castles and continue with queen to the g3. Remember that this type of formation is a killer. It holds black down to a hold. And so it's like he doesn't have a counterplay. Not really, at least. Queen c7 and a normal development could follow, although that doesn't really bring anything too much. So you could see white can play now bishop e3, bishop to the d4, driving black's rook away. We can have rook e1 or rook to the d1 coming up any second with the next moves. And you could realize that any sort of move, whether it's going to be a move of pawn up to the e5 or any other, is actually not going to work out for black. Bishop g7, knight d5. Following strongly the idea that if black plays with bishop takes the d5, well, it's going to get the c file open with c takes d, and the bishop pair and everything could be great. Just shows why that's a bad game for black. Queen d8, that's an idea. He could do this in order to try and keep his queen across and around. But it doesn't matter because then white's able to plan ahead with h4. That move, together with the idea of h5, just feels excellent. Now we see the knight on the d7 that's being tied down to protect the b6. And we see also the terrible bishops that he cannot do. He can do very little with, in my opinion. So it's excellent. Little by little, things are just done extremely well and properly. So again, it could transform in different ways. The e4 c4 pawn structure can translate into different ways. Maybe it can translate into a king's side attack or something different. Either way though, it's always going to come down to one thing: how does white get to use this in order to set more powerful or efficient threats against the black position? If that's done, the rest is easy. I can guarantee it. Black castles, white simply jolts in the h5 move. He's got the attack happening against the g6, maybe even f4, and similar ideas could work pretty quick. So black tries knight c5, and this is the moment where white plays just h6. We don't care so much about the fact that black's got a knight out there. I mean, it's a nice looking knight, but it doesn't, the reality is that it doesn't get to do so much. We force a serious challenge, and then after black plays bishop h8, then white can do pawn to the b4. It's a great looking move, strong resource, and it works. If black does a move like knight x to the d3, we can understand that there's bishop takes to the b6, which will be a fantastic idea. So black's got a lot to worry. If black plays the move of knight at the d7 in this moment, then of course white plays bishop g5 here, and then there is bishop to the e3. There is also the move of f4 that white will quickly make. So in case of the exchange, white could retake with the rook or even with the bishop, and it is a great setup. Most of black's own pieces have very little to do, and that's mostly because of the way and how they look. They just don't look good. Truth is, he's got a lot of problems to worry about, and it is painful to watch type of position. What happened after rook to f7? Well, after the move of rook to the f7, white plays bishop e2 here, and rook a to the d1. Just forget about anything else. All we care about is, can we maintain the much stronger and superior position of our pieces? White cares about that. He doesn't care about whether those type of tactics are going to help him to win the game or break through black's position. Those are things that don't matter so much. The key is, though, I want to have my pieces better. And, that helps you to wait to keep the position just like this until your opponent actually breaks open himself. And when he does, when they do, that is wonderful, because as a result of a move like f5, we're able to play alongside the move of e takes f, g takes f, and this is the moment where white plays f4. Position is going to open, that's for sure, but the really interesting part is that when the position actually gets to open up, he's got nothing, and I literally mean nothing to support it with, nothing to back up his the position and do whatever. And it's great. It's really just a real nice little sequence on how white sets out the control. We have moves like bishop to h5 that can follow up with, and the black rook is going to be in trouble. His king is not good. The rest of the pieces actually feel pretty bad as we look at them. Maybe one thing is bishop takes the d capture and knight f6, but then there's rook f3, rook d3, and there's that real question. Where's black going? Seriously, he has the majority of his pieces totally down back, with the d6 under pressure, e5 under attack, and everything else. It becomes one of these extremely difficult, extremely hard positions with no real value. I mean, there's no value, within anything that black is going to try. There is no continuation to it. There's no solid follow-up or whatever you call it. It is just a bad position with bad sequences and a lot of bad things that are definitely going to happen. So that's where black is sort of losing his control here. What's going to happen in that type of position? Well, the reality is black can't do much. He can play knight e4, queen to the h3, and queen c8, but then white sets up his bishop on the h5, rook to rook f6, and bishop takes to b6. Winning the pawn, keeping black a little bit more on the downside for a little longer, and holding him, passive. That is genuinely it. This is what we're looking to do. Keep the opponent down. It's going to take some time to do this, but it's brilliant, and it took away all the good stuff from him. He plays queen takes to the c4, of course, intending to just make some sort of, I don't know, like complications, we could say. But it doesn't really matter, because truth is, after queen takes to the c, f takes to the e5, white's opening up even more lines, more opportunities, and it just, it gets impossible to keep it protected, actually, with the next moves. Taking, black plays with d takes to the e5, and white does rook takes f5. It's great. It's a nice attack, because in case black plays rook takes f, there could be queen takes f5. We have the king of black that is awfully placed, and it is awesome. It's really good. Next move, of course, queen c1, but that doesn't really relate so much to the opening. It's just more on how white got to this position. So you can see the power of the Maróczy bind, and the reason why I dig it so much. It's a beautiful sort of resource and activity white can take. Let's take a look at some other examples on how white can manage different strategies. One of the things that I've almost always loved was the Catalan approach. The Catalan approach works especially well against the symmetrical English, and it is one of the things that we can do, in different ways. So let's take a look at this game that was played between Gelfand and Nisipiano, two very famous grandmasters. So let's take a look as to what really, went on in their game. After e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, white went on with this quick approach for controlling a little more space in the center, which is lovely. And instead of e4, which is now going to be probably responded by, moves like, say, bishop b4 or whatever, white simply picks up to do g3. If you ask me, I'd say this is a really helpful move. First off, it sets white up for the bishop to the g2 idea, and that's wonderful. Then, secondly, we are going to love the concept of pressuring or keeping a challenge against black's whole queen side and everything. So that's a great thing. And above all else, because this is already quite good, the idea is if black jumps in to play with anything like d5 or whatever, that this is going to be a perfect resource. So like we could exchange on the d5, we can keep a good pressure, maybe even think about developing our bishop on the g5. Whatever we do, it is going to be a really solid way to play it. White is perfect. So actually we see black, sort of failing in this type of position. So there is not a whole lot he can make. So a good example of, generally how we're supposed to be analyzing and thinking about a position like this. So black has a lot to worry about. d5 is going to be threatened. Black's forces are down on the backside for the most part, and that makes white's position incredibly terrific as you can go. So, what else is there? This is a good setup as a starting point. Okay, so we could basically say that in this position, black can do queen b6. This is usually one of his better ways to go. But then white can simply come up with a knight. So step forward with it, get it there to that square. So now we're having a nice shot, maybe with bishop to d3. That knight is a little closer, so we can have moves like knight d6 or even knight c7 as a potential threat there. So it feels right, it looks good, and black is quite down back on development and passive. So that gives white some wonderful, almost great opportunities. Knight e5, bishop g2. The structure with g3 and bishop to the g2 allows white to have pressure, but more than anything else, it gives us the initiative, or the chance to fight for initiative. So fighting for the initiative is what really white wants to do. It's not easy to do, but that is ultimately what he's looking to do. He would like to follow it that way. So what's really coming after the move of bishop to the g2? Okay, bishop to the g2 is definitely played out in order to reach for the b7. We can think of a move like bishop to the f4. We could consider, advances towards c7 and other activities. And I have to admit, it is a good line. Good follow-up continuation. Good structure. Not too much to worry, and certainly a lot of, great possibilities for for white. So like, what is actually going on in that type of position? Well, as a matter of fact, right after that, things look excellent. So why not just move it up there? Go ahead and follow through. Bishop to the g2, and so essentially right after continuing with the move of bishop to the g2, a6, white played like this. Again, it is a really easy position because of the formation and how everything is was set up. Again, it's possible, it's good, and it is really easy to do. So not a problem at all. Let's just go with that and enjoy the opportunities out there. So it's pretty strong. I mean, in terms of a continuation in here, everything is just jolting. It's just after knight a3, obviously what black had to do is to continue with bishop to the e7. He was thinking about like just getting ready to castle and make everything possible and easy. But then after bishop to the e7, castles, d6, white plays queen to the b3. And in case black actually picks up to exchange the queens, we're going to have the ability to recapture, do a move like bishop to the e3 if possible, and even concentrate on bringing up some more possibilities like bishop to the b6 and some others. So it's really a very comfortable position, no complications and everything. Black plays queen to the c7 right here, and so after the move of queen to the c7, of course, this is the moment where white can play bishop f4. Castles, rook to the d1, knight to the g6, bishop to the e3. There is also the idea of playing a move like bishop to the b6 that will come out any second. So basically what turns out is that almost every single piece of white is perfectly in place for the attack. Black does knight to the d7, and now white plays knight a4. I have to admit that I don't think that this move was all that necessary, yet the presence of white's pawn on the c4 actually is just great, because it takes off squares like b5 and d5 that black would otherwise go by in order to open up. And as he's unable to do any of this, like, so why does he have to worry? Just we are setting it up. We're having great resources to advance with, and so it will continue in the same way. Knight to the a4, we are ready to get going. We have knight to the b6 even whenever possible, and it would work out. It would work out perfectly. So that's good. Black can actually try to do the move of rook to the b8 there, and then there's queen to the e3. Here, rook c1. It's a wonderful set of pieces. We have good pressure versus the d6 pawn, and we see that black is definitely having a whole lot of problems to be resolving. So maybe white can try bishop to the b6 or knight b6 or anything. Just a matter of a couple of moves to really begin with. So queen a5, b3. Challenges are great. Black is definitely behind and down back. He's suffering, and white is strong in terms of control. It's great. One of the most important ideas, one of the most wonderful concepts in such a position is always keep your opponent on the backside so that he's got to worry and he's got many things to be concerned about. That pawn does that brilliantly. And so, in fact, actually after that type of position, b3, black plays with the move of knight to the e7, here, there, and actually exchanging. Rook takes d6. Again, I don't want to say that this was probably white's best way to play it, but it was a very efficient one. It was a very efficient version on how white got his pieces to work together and keep themselves, in the attack. So, let's take a look at a couple other examples on how white can apply restriction versus black in different ways. This was a game that was played between Sviatozorje and his opponent was an international master, I believe, named Mays, which was pretty good example as to how a restriction can be applied from the very beginning in almost any order. So c4, c5, knight f3, and then knight to the f6. white plays up with knight c3, exchanging, and d4. And this almost looks like very rushed type of sequence. Like you may look at this and say, "Oh, like Valeria, I'm not sure about it. I don't know if I'm supposed to be playing it like this. It looks quick. It looks, a little too fast, a little too straightforward. I'm not sure." And you'll be right. I mean, thinking about it like it is a little too quick is true. It is a little hard to imagine, anything powerful, anything that good. But then again, after c takes to the d4 and then queen takes to the d4, you can realize why that is so good. Knight takes to c is met by queen takes to the c. We can have the bishop to f4 as an idea, and then we can have moves like rook to the d1 played out pretty quickly. And so it looks alright. It definitely does look quite good and quite alright at this point. So this is good. Let's take a look. So we could say if black plays knight c6, there is e4. And that's, I think, one of the best versions on how white can make it. e4, prepping for that light square bishop to move out and set itself forward to the square of b5. Black is a little behind. He's not castled yet, even. So again, this requires development, but here's another interesting idea. By opening up pretty quickly and taking control of the center, white is almost making it easy for the other pieces to follow that through. And this is great. Let's take a look and see how that goes. e4, black can play e6. Now white can do a3, just preventing on any tactics on that area. Maybe black could play bishop to b4 or whatever. Now he can no longer do this. Black plays bishop d7, bishop to e2, rook c8, short castles. And then we have, of course, the idea of playing queen to the d3. On the very next move, white is likely just going to move along with rook to the d1. He will be applying extra tension against black's d7. His king, the black king, on the e8 feels fairly bad. So that was a very, that was an almost incredibly wonderful plan for white to follow with. When black plays bishop c6, there's queen to e3, bishop a4, b4, and then bishop to the d1, which worked out perfect. If the knight takes on the a1, there's going to be bishop takes to the a4, and it's incredibly sequential and efficient, and in its own way. So that was great. That was really, really good. And again, I think the secret of this line really comes down to the move a3 and how white was able to utilize his pawns in restriction to most of black's pieces. It's always a great idea to see something like that being made in such a way, and it's just wonderful. Now, black never had a resource to fight back against all of white's good pieces, and that made it really clear as to why white is so much better. When there is such a strong limitation, and so that black is basically so far down behind in development, it makes a lot of sense to play it like this. So black had big problems, huge issues with this position, and especially with that king on the e8, so it worked out greatly. Well, that was a wonderful setup. The position was great. Like bishop to the b2 with the exchange, queen to c3. And okay, of course, white made a mistake by playing queen to the c3, but that has to do with the middle game stage, really. It doesn't have to do with the earlier stage of the game. So that's a good thing. Overall, pretty good game, which shows one more approach on how we can limit black in the c5 variation.